And I just appreciate all you guys hopping in. It's an exciting time of the year. We've had some 60 and 70-degree days. We have a cold spell moving in, but it's going to be back in the 60s and 70s. Our bees are growing well, and the pollens have just been fantastic for our bees in Middle Tennessee. I hope that those of you who are around my area are experiencing something similar. And for those of you who are still kind of in winter, will have something like that to look forward to. We're going to get a little cool. We're going to have a lot of different topics, and drop your questions down below. We're going to talk, Bob and I, just for a little bit, but Chris is going to keep track of your questions, and we're going to try to get to every single one that we can. All right, let's welcome Bob Binnie.
Hey, Kamon, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. It's always fun to have you on and get to hang out with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I don't see you often enough. We're, this beekeeping industry. We have all these people that we consider our good friends, and we only see them like once or twice a year,
if we're lucky, and
if we're lucky, yeah.
Honestly, if it wasn't for the Bee Expo and you come into that every year, that might not be at all. So
That's right.
Thankfully, Kathleen and I were able to come down to your place last year and get some equipment. And she was actually talking about visiting and seeing your observation hive and several things the other day. So
yeah.
She had a blast, and her and my son, she just turned 14, by the way, 2 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So
fun times lie ahead, Kamon.
I know. Well, she's asking all the right questions. She's like, do you have any bee work for me to do? I want to make some money. And so I like that. I want her to to do a little bit of work and make some money. And her and Jimmy are going to be assembling some boxes, and likely we're going to be selling some wax dipped boxes. I've got a bunch, and we're downsizing our operation a little bit, Bob. I know I've talked to you about that a little bit. So, but what part of your season are you in, Bob? Where do you think you're at? How far from swarming, and when does your honey flow start?
Well, we're probably 2 weeks from what I would call our major splitting period beginning. We actually split some colonies today, but it's because we had some queens that were sold and a customer backed out, and suddenly there was 44 queens sitting there.
Oh, no.
So we went out and found a bee yard and started splitting about 2 weeks ahead of time. And that's okay, honestly. I mean, I can't do all my splitting in 1 week. I've got to spread it out. So getting a few started a little early, it felt okay. They were queens from Chris Werner, Indian Summer Honey Farm, you know so well. And we purchase a lot of queens from him every year, and we use some and sell some. They go in our packages and our nukes. And the customer just at the last minute said, I can't take them. So we split with those today.
Well, that's interesting. So you're about 2 weeks from splitting. And when do you think your honey flow on average begins there? You want to have your supers ready to go?
Well, our outfit kind of runs north to south and lower to higher elevations. So our very earliest yards, the major honey flow, which would be things like blackberry and tulip poplar and things like that, generally starts around the 15th of April, sometimes the 20th. And if you go all the way to the north end of our operation in the higher elevations, it won't start until the first week in May. So there's a big difference, which is actually a blessing. It's a very good thing, because that means all the bees aren't doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. And then in late summer or fall, it's exactly the opposite. The northern bees come to an end earlier, so they need to be treated earlier, fed earlier, and kind of put away for the season a couple weeks earlier than the southern bees do. So it goes reverse in the fall, and it is a blessing. I'm glad I don't have to do everything all at once.
That makes a lot of sense. And so you're in Northeast Georgia and
Western North Carolina. I have to add that in because a lot of my yards are across the border. And of course, those are the higher elevation yards actually into North Carolina.
Interesting. And so for those few folks on here that don't know who you are, now they know. And how many colonies are you running these days, Bob?
We have downsized a lot. At my peak, I was probably close to 3,000, and I think this summer will probably be around 11 or 1,200. Every year I go down 100, and it's a couple reasons. I can't work as hard as I used to, honestly. That's sad to say, but Kamon, I'm starting to feel my age a little bit.
Well,
Now I know there's a joke in there. You can just stay quiet about that.
I don't do those kind of jokes. I
Yeah.
don't know what you're talking about.
And then, of course, the rest of my business is taking so much of my time. The honey packing, the bee supply part is actually growing substantially. It's surprising us this spring that our new website, well, it's not so new now. The new website finally came out last April, May. And this late winter and early spring, we're actually starting to get a lot of orders through our website. So the bee supply part is starting to pick up. The wood shop is pick up. You've seen it. We have a substantial wood shop, and we make some things, not everything, but some things. So it's getting busier. It's a multifaceted business. And 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was just a beekeeper, but now I'm wearing all these other hats, and that takes away from beekeeping. Sort of sadly, I'd rather just be a full-time beekeeper, but honestly, I'm having fun growing these other things. I like to grow things and make things, and growing the other part of the business is fun too now.
Well, and a lot of people appreciate you for that because you are selling honey to some other beekeepers, and you're also selling a lot of equipment to beekeepers, sometimes myself. I know you've sold to Josh Hager and many of my buddies, some of them who are on here tonight. And you make really high quality stuff, and you have really high standards. And so people appreciate knowing that they're going to get something good. And for us, this is something I was talking to my 2 new employees today. We spent almost the entire day filming, and now here I am on another video.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have a new channel that's just starting up, and we've only done the introduction video, but we'll have an agricultural YouTube channel, and we're also producing more beekeeping videos also.
Wow.
And so they were talking to me about it and what I thought. And I said, well, I think it's working really good. I'm excited about where it's going. But if I'm being honest, I would rather be in a beehive right now.
Yeah, I get it. I understand completely.
But
You're really lucky and blessed that you have someone like Chris helping you and some of the others that are coming. So that's the key. That's the key.
It is. And the way I look at it is I want to help other people get into bees. I also want to help this bee industry. And I think that that's the next step for us. Is we've done some stuff with the conference, but there's a lot of great people in this industry who know a lot, and I think have a lot to offer on the industry level, but they just need to be put together. And I think that we are in a unique position to help facilitate that. And I think there's a lot to do there. So we're going to keep our bees a little bit lower so we can do other things. And hopefully more beekeepers will make up for any honey and nukes that I don't produce and that kind of stuff. Speaking of nukes, this gentleman or lady would like to know, do you still have any nukes for sale, Bob?
Well, I'm actually, for the first time in a very, very long time, we're not selling nukes this year. I guess we have time. I can tell the story.
Sure.
As I've downsized, I suddenly have too many honey supers, and a lot of them are deeps. I have right now sitting idle about 1,200 deep boxes that are full of drawn comb that have traditionally been used as honey supers. And so I don't want to just sell them. They have some value, of course, but they have a heck of a lot more value if I put bees in them, put a lid in the bottom with them, and then sell them later in the season. So this year, all of the nukes are going to go into this deep equipment, which will become available later this year after the sourwood flows over. So my strategy is to build nukes over the next month to a month and a half, fill these singles, and have them fat and sassy in time for the sourwood flow, which in our northern location starts the first week in July. And then after the sourwood flows over, put them up for sale. And that's a good way of selling used equipment, is to put bees in it. It's much more valuable that way.
So you're switching to, I guess, selling some packages maybe this year?
I am. Well, as you know, I'm brokering Olivarez packages. We're getting quite a few packages from them in April. And I guess, is it okay if I do a little self-promotion here for a second?
Well,
I know
of course you can, Bob. Of course you can.
So we're brokering Olivarez packages, and we're making some packages ourselves, and we're also getting packages from a friend of mine in Franklin that I've been doing every year. And we'll be taking orders for Olivarez packages up till April 1st. And those will be delivered and available. They will be available on April 10th. If anybody's interested in that, simply call our store and you can make an order. And we're providing all the lines of bees that they traditionally. Wow, you're on the ball there, Kamon.
Oh, I know.
Go to live, or maybe that's Chris doing it. Is that Chris doing that?
It's totally Chris.
No. Go to the live bees up there. You go. Yeah.
So, folks, this is Blue Ridge Honey Company, which is Bob's company. So check it out.
Yeah, we have a pretty good website now. So, brokering Olivarez packages, making some of our own, and then also providing some from a friend of mine in Franklin, North Carolina. We're just calling those Southern Appalachian bees.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, no nukes, first time in a very long time, decades. So we're actually getting a lot of calls from people that are kind of cranky, like, how come no nukes this year? And it's self-serving is all it is. I'm trying to fill out. I've got a lot of medium supers too that'll be enough for the future. So I just want to get rid of the deeps and fill them full of bees and sell them.
So I want to go ahead and say a little bit more about this, and then we'll get to some questions, and then we'll get back to talking about a few other odds and ends. I want to make sure we get to some questions timely. But Chris and I just got back from Olivarez, and that's what I was talking to you about, Bob, before this went live. And for the folks that maybe don't know who Olivarez is, it's a large beekeeping family out in Northern California, and I've heard about them for a couple decades. I mean, they've been around longer than I've been around. So but you just don't know until you go and visit these places. And we did, and we just had a really great experience. And I've been to different operations that have shook bees before. And Bob, you would have loved it. They shake the bees later in the day so that the customer's only getting those young bees. Even the shaker boxes that they have are designed, and the way that they slowly put the bees down in there, it encourages still the vast majority of only the non-flying bees to get into those shaker boxes. And so they have a really good system. They also are putting a lot of time on their side to ensure that the Saskatraz lines and the Golden West and any of the lines that they're running are going into yards where they can dominate all the mileage around where those queens are flying to ensure that you're truly getting a Saskatraz or a Golden West queens. The amount of effort, even when it comes down to the little things that they're putting into these queens and the breeding details, it is truly amazing. And if ever a package producer was putting this much effort into it, we wouldn't have some of the package stories that we hear about. Even how they truck them out is amazing.
Well, I guess the old saying, you get what you pay for. They are a little more expensive than South Georgia packages, which gave me a pause at first. And then I finally went ahead and signed on. And I'm glad I did. I've gotten to know Ray really well. He's a nice guy. That's a nice family. They're all good folks. And so far, all of my dealings with them have been quite pleasant, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, just family operation. Everything's run at a very high level, and you go there and they're just doing the right stuff, and it's really impressive. So I think anyone that spends a few extra bucks to get those packages will find that if there's an extra $10 or $15, that they're going to be really happy with what they got out in addition. And I think that there's a lot of value to be placed on queens that are actually being bred a certain way, because a couple of the operations that I visited in Georgia, they're going to a random colony, and I asked them, I said, so what are you doing for your genetics? I was like, well, we just go to a colony like this one that's really laying good brood and it looks good, and we're just going to graft from this one today. And I'm like, we don't know if that queen's been laying for even 2 months yet. We don't know a lot about that colony because you're just looking at it and going, that looks good. And I think for a hobbyist, that's fine. But when you're pumping out maybe hundreds of thousands of queens, I think you should probably spend a little bit more time on hygienic behavior and stuff.
Sure. I see what Chris has on the screen right now. As you know, we've been using Golden West queens for a couple of years now, and we're liking those a lot. They show promise, and we're using some for our own queens this year that we're producing for ourselves. We have a couple Golden West queens set aside that are outstanding as far as mite resistance. We'll be grafting from that. And we also have a few Caucasian queens that are showing outstanding mite resistance. I don't typically think of Caucasians as particularly mite resistant, but I think in almost every population, if you dig deep enough, you will find some mite resistance. I had a conversation with Randy about that a few months ago. I keep crossing paths with that man. We end up speaking at the same conventions or something. Very smart. We talked about that subject. Almost anywhere in the country, if you just dig deep enough, you will find some colonies that are mite resistant, and it's just simply, start breeding from that stuff, and you'll make headway.
Yeah. And, they're really honest about it is what I like. They put a lot of work into it. They're also running a commercial operation. And so I think it's a lot more difficult to run a commercial operation and try to produce that consistently. And they're finding that half of their operation, they're not having to treat, and then the other half is performing better. And they're just spot treating where they need to, but they're still finding less treatments. And I've talked to multiple commercial beekeepers that are very large that are also finding similar successes with those. So that's exciting. And that's some of the packages that you have to offer. And so that's something someone can look into. So let's get to some questions.
Okay.
And Chris, do you want to begin that, please? What type of probiotic to use? I don't use any. So Bob, do you use probiotics?
Yeah, we use strong microbial super DFM. There is a lot of debate, as you know, out there, whether it's a waste of money or not. And I would never bet my life on something like this, but we really do believe we see a difference. I've learned a lot. I've educated myself, and there's a lot more to probiotics than what meets the eye, more than just the simple research projects will tell you. And of course, about Jorg, my friend over at the vet lab at the University of Georgia. He really is sharp on this subject, and he's the one that kind of brought me on board. And I'll tell a little deep, dark secret here. Why not, right?
It's not about me, right?
No, it's not about you.
That's good.
It's about me, actually. A couple of years ago, I guess it's been about 3 years ago now, I bought some queens out of Florida from someone whom we won't name. And it wasn't a lot. It was just enough to requeen a yard or two. And when we requeened this one yard in particular, we watched European foul brood go around that yard in about a month and just watched it go from colony to colony. And the rest of our outfit did not have it. So I was pretty sure that we brought in European foul brood with those queens, which is quite possible. There's no debate to that. And we poured the terramycin in there, and it just wouldn't touch it. So Jorg got wind of this, and he came over with his vials and his swabs and took some tests, and he reported back and said, Bob, you've got a strain of EFB that I'm not familiar with. It's resistant to every antibiotic that I know of. And you also have more, I don't know what the right word is. I want to say parts per billion, but that's not it. Spores or whatever, bacterium per billion than he'd ever seen or heard of before. I said, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? Because terramycin wasn't touching it. And that's when the probiotic conversation started. At that time, I had two friends that had major trouble with European foul brood. They were large migratory beekeepers. One was 5,000, one was 4,500 colonies, and they couldn't shake European foul brood. They were using all the antibiotics, tylosin, lincomycin, terramycin, wasn't touching it. And they started using probiotics and slowly watched their problem disappear. And that's exactly what I experienced. That yard today is completely clear of European foul brood, and we don't have a problem. I'm not going to tell you I never see it, but I will tell you that the problem is for the most part gone away. And I feel that it's because of our religious use of probiotics. I really do believe that.
Well, and you're also mostly raising a lot of your own queens or getting queens from people who are breeding for genetics that are more
true.
Hygienic and better. And I had a smaller instance where I purchased 100 queens when I was on the road back when I was driving a truck, and I got the cheapest queens that I could find. And at that time, I could get them. It was summer. I could get them for like $18 a piece. And so I did, and they came out of Georgia, and I'm like, cheap queens, but yeah, it's only $18. I'll order a couple extras, and if I have some loss as well.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had European foul brood like crazy, and it wasn't a wet or bad dank period of time. I had no instances of having a massive case before. All of a sudden, 2 of my yards were just riddled with it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if I knew about strong microbials at that time, but I had to requeen the entire thing and ended up losing some of the colonies because they just got so weak by the time I got around to requeening them and building them up. So that's again why I think it's worthwhile to invest into queens that have a little bit more. They've been selected for hygienic behavior and a little bit more of that. So sometimes cheap costs. And so that's actually one of the things we say around here. Sometimes cheap costs. Bob, it was great talking to you about your trip around Scotland this morning at the store. Well, look, everyone's talking to Bob.
Okay. We have a steady stream of people that come into the store, and it's fun to meet them. I'm not always there, and I don't always have the time that they deserve. Some people come from a distance, and I feel bad if I can just spend 3 minutes with them and then I have to race off. But if I'm there, I try to chat with folks. It's fun.
Did Chris make Kamon comb his hair tonight? Of course not. Chris can't make me do anything. He's tried, and it doesn't work very good. Now he'll give me work to do. He's very good at giving me work to do.
Hey, there's a good question. Kamon, I got your book today. My wife won't let me read it first.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, thank you for purchasing the book. And of course, I can't take all the credit. Blake did a lot of work on that book and really spearheaded the beginning of the project. And then I went through his stuff and told him, no, you're completely wrong here. Get rid of that. Blake did a really good job, and I think I helped a bit. And it turned out, I think, as a really good veteran level book. It's definitely not I think it's helpful for beginners, but it's definitely meant to take a beginner to the next level, not just keep you in the new beekeeper phase.
I like the format. I like the way it's laid out. It's different. It's unusual. I like it.
Well, that's me and Blake, I suppose. Blake and I, which he just had a birthday, by the way. He's a year younger than I am in a few months. And
you young whippersnappers, I don't know.
Yeah, he told me he's celebrating his 6th anniversary of his 30th birthday. So happy birthday, Blake. Would love a long video with Bob's neighbor showing all the interesting magnolias and other plants on the property. So there's an idea, Bob, maybe.
I wish it was daylight outside. Those 2 windows behind me show like 60 or 80 magnolias, some of which are in bloom out on the bank back there.
That's awesome.
I'll talk to Jack about that. It's really not a beekeeping video, but it is interesting. I'll spend a minute on Jack, my neighbor. This man is a walking, talking, self-taught plant expert. Mm-hmm. He travels the world, and world travelers come here to see him. And he often brings them over to my house. He says I've got as good of a magnolia collection as many botanical gardens in the United States. And it all started when I had a D8 cat out here carving out a flat spot on my bank, and there was all that field dirt. And Jack said, "Do you mind if I plant a few plants?" I said, "No, help yourself." I said, only two things I need. They got to take care of themselves, and I don't want to touch them. They got to take care of themselves. He says, "No problem." So I got massive amounts of world-class, can't buy anywhere type of magnolias all over my property.
Wow.
That's all because I just told Jack to help yourself.
That's the type of neighbor we all would like to have right there.
He's pretty sharp. Yeah.
That's awesome. One of the guys I hired, he was talking today about a Florida strain of tomato that was brought up, and it's naturalized there in the Everglades, and it's called Everglades, and is really heat and obviously humidity tolerant, because Florida has a lot of both of those things.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting variety. Of course, he's naming off all the Latin names and all this stuff, and he's just like that. He loves that. And so I like being around nerds. I'm a bee nerd. He's a plant nerd. Nerds are pretty passionate people. And my uncle actually gives the recommendation we gave it to his daughters, is you need to marry a nerd. You need to find someone that's passionate about something. If they're not passionate about something, it's a red flag. So I guess bees is my thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So I hear the queen measures the cells to determine to lay a drone or a worker. And I saw that if her hair touches the sides of a worker cell, it gets fertilized. Drone being bigger doesn't touch, so not to fertilize. Any thoughts on that, Bob? I know they measure the cell, but I haven't heard the thing about the hair before.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about the hair thing. They obviously measure the cells. You can watch them do it. But I hadn't heard about the hair thing before. It's possible. It seems quite feasible.
It just probably took $750,000 of our tax money in order to get that information. If it's true.
Sounds like another project for a grad student. There's a million of them out there.
Sure. Chris, how about another question? Should I put a frame of brood with packages of bees when I get them?
Absolutely, if you got it. Absolutely. That's a no-brainer.
So,
in my opinion, I'm sorry, Kamon, I'm stepping all over this. What do you think on that?
No one's here to listen to me unless I'm asking you questions. So I agree. First of all, because I might be drawn and quartered if I disagree. And secondly, I agree because if you have some colonies that maybe are too far ahead and you want to pull them back to keep them from swarming early, right before your flow starts, and they can afford a little bit of brood taken away from, of course, you're helping your packages really get some ground speed. Yeah. And you could be preventing some of your bigger colonies from wanting to swarm too. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good attractant for the package too, so they don't drift away.
Mm-hmm. I started following Bob's channel 5 years ago and enjoy it very much. Then Kamon's a bit later. I'm a beekeeper and biology professor from Tripoli, Libya, and I send you a big thanks. Well, that's awesome.
That's
long ways away from here. I wonder what time it is over there right now.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Let's see. It must be midnight or something. No, it's later, much later. Yeah. Must be 2 or 3 in the morning.
Well, we just had a time change here, and I'm just all out of whack, so I don't even know what's up from down right now.
Yeah. It doesn't matter, Kamon. We work from the time the sun comes up till it goes down, so who cares what time it is?
I know. It's only a politician could think that's a benefit to anybody. So Chris says, hey, Kamon and Bob, have you guys ever noticed bigger queens being more productive? Do you find any queens to be bigger than the others?
Do you want to do that one, Kamon?
Well, I think you probably would answer it better, but I will add something. The last few years selling several nukes, and I've been marking them, and also just handling queens when I've been over in Hawaii with Zach. After you've handled hundreds of queens back to back, you can feel a difference with your fingers on how big around that thorax is. And as far as productivity goes, generally speaking, bigger queens are better because they can hold more, and they have a bigger spermatheca. They have more potential for longevity and output. But I've seen some big queens that had some issues before. So just because she's big and beautiful doesn't always mean that she's great. But typically you want bigger queens because that probably means they were fed really good nutrition, and that's what you're shooting for.
Yeah. I'm going to say something that's going to sound odd and may need some explanation. It's not so much that bigger queens do better, it's that smaller queens do worse. In other words, it's the puny queens that are less than average. They're the ones that, if you're comparing the bigger queens to those, there's a huge difference. And yeah, you're right about the nutrition part and how they were raised and all that. But if you got a good sized queen and maybe another queen that's a little larger, I'm not sure I see a lot of difference. But when you're comparing to a notably smaller queen, yeah, there's a big difference.
And of course, time of the year. Right now, my queens are really plumping up because they're laying sheets of brood. But if you'd have looked at those queens in November or October, a lot of them were starting, especially the carnies, really starting to shut down a lot of their brood reign, and they were skinnier looking at that point. So a lot of it depends on the time of the year. And I've had some colonies that have gone queenless, and the first queen didn't take, and then they were trying to make a late queen off of some very old larvae. It was way too old. And it did make a queen, but she looked very small, hardly looked like a queen. She looked almost like a worker bee. And of course, they rapidly superseded those. half queens, if you will, because they just knew something wasn't right.
Well, this can be an issue. I just spoke in Anderson, South Carolina the other night about spring management, and the question of walkaway splits came up. And this is one of the problems that can arise from doing walkaway splits. Sometimes the queens that come out of those units aren't as good as something that would have been raised properly. And it has to do with the emergency cell building impulse, really.
Yeah. And so I must have missed that one, Chris. Go ahead. This is going to be my first year beekeeping in Birmingham, Alabama. Our packages are delayed, and it doesn't look like they will be here till mid-April. Any advice on whether to feed or not to feed? Well,
yeah,
Alabama is quite a bit further than I am, Bob, and I'm a little disappointed if I don't get my bees the first week of April because, I only have a flow that goes to about the first or second week of June. And in Birmingham, more than likely, theirs is going to shut off a little quicker than mine.
yeah.
Not always the case, but, sometimes these things happen, though. Sometimes weather happens and whatever. But I feed my packages, especially if you don't have comb, you really need to get that comb drawn. So any thoughts on that situation, Bob?
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Even if there's a nectar flow, I'd put the feed on them. You're right. Mid-April in Birmingham, it's about over by then. You might have some privet and stuff like that that'll linger on. And it's just going to take quite a bit of feeding because, in my opinion, you need to have 2 boxes drawn out for winter. So they might have a big sugar bill here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Honestly, it can be part of the fun. My very first spring that I bought 8 colonies and split them to pieces, I ended up feeding quite a lot. And yeah, it was a lot of work and messy making sugar syrup on the stove. Suzette didn't care for it much, but I had fun doing it. It was fun to watch the progress. Yeah.
And thanks for the comment, Zach and Chris, for bringing it up there. Everyone could see. Go ahead. Yeah, definitely only here for Bob. And I was just talking about visiting Zach and maybe even was going to throw him a nice plug on the quality queens. But you know what? Forget it. What I'm hearing is I need to let everybody know Zach's phone number and that he's got a discount on queens for $15 a pop. Get them while they last.
Bob, are you working with anyone regarding the yellow-legged hornet? I'm in Northeast Tennessee, and we'll be putting traps out this year. Yeah, I got a hornet story, and it's not. The short answer is I have friends that are involved with yellow-legged hornets quite deeply, and I'm in touch with them all the time to see what's going on. It's coming. It's here. It's not going away. This is going to surprise some people. I had 2 yards last fall. There were some of my lower elevation yards south of the shop where every single colony was taken out by European hornets. No bees left when they were done. It was really hard to watch. And we put out all the homemade traps. We started doing it in late August when we could see what was happening, and we couldn't stop it. So I'm going to be putting traps out next week in all my yards. Every yard I have is going to receive a high quality hornet trap. And, if I'm experiencing that from European hornets and the yellow-legged hornets come on the scene, it could be catastrophic. Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is it only happened in a few yards. And in some cases, a yard that might be 2 miles away experienced none of it. So it was obvious, that some of the yards had multiple large nests close by. And those things overwinter. The queens overwinter. So I'm going to put out traps and hopefully catch me some hornet queens pretty soon.
Well, good luck with that. And I will be having Brad with Clemson and on my live stream soon to talk about what they're doing and what how they could use a little bit of help and kind of what the situation is. It's a frustrating situation, but we're also dealing with a very tricky situation. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we're going to be having several people speak at the expo this year on yellow-legged hornet and what's being done in Georgia and in South Carolina, because there's a lot of confusion on what's being done or what people think is not being done. And we want to get that clear and also get more people involved where they can and looking for hawking, which is what they do at the entrance. We're also in talks with several of them about what type of new ways can be created to control them. And my hope is, and I think our best bet is, let's say one of Bob's employees sees it in one of your yards that there's some hawking from one of these hornets, and because they're at the entrance just waiting to catch one of your bees and eat it. And the problem with that is, of course, they eat a lot and the nests get very huge. But then on top of that, your bees see that, and a lot of times they won't forage like normal. And this is happening typically the worst in late summer, early fall,
Yeah.
when you really need to be prepping and that momentum for that winter cluster. And so it's just bad timing. And so what we're hoping is that a product can be created where you can get a trap that won't kill them in the trap. It'll actually catch them live. We
Right.
can dust them with a product that they'll take back to their nest, and it'll euthanize the colony.
Yeah. My understanding is that boric acid, borax, 20 mule team borax actually will do it. Yeah, we're going to be paying close attention. I went into one of my yards, it was late August, early September, and just walking through the yard, it looked like I'd had a pesticide kill. I thought, oh my gosh, we've been hit hard. And when I got down on my knees and looked very closely, it was the heads and the thorax. The abdomens were all gone. That's how bad it was. They were leaving all those parts behind, taking the fat part of the bee away. And it looked like I had a severe pesticide kill on the ground.
That's not what we like to hear. So
no, not borax.
Boric
acid. Okay.
Boric acid. Well, whichever. When I was talking to Brad, he said some of the things are working partially, but it does weaken them, but it doesn't kill the nest. And what we would like is something that's very specific to the problem, and so that it is safe for anything else, but it's really egregious against the yellow-legged hornet would be nice. And so I'm hoping that we can get some work done there, but that's where beekeepers have got to work together. We're a small industry, and I think that the leadership in this industry should be spearheading that. It's not currently happening, but things can change. So Kamon, when do you typically start grafting? Queen Rearing Essentials suggests to wait to black locust blooms. I'm located in East Tennessee, so I already have drones. I've had drones for the last week. Not a lot of emerged drones, but I definitely have a lot of drones being produced, and many of them are in the purple eye stage, and some are now emerged, I'm sure. So I typically don't start raising queens until the 3rd week of March. So we're really close to that. Some years I could probably push it up a little bit, but I definitely don't like to, because I think rushing your queens is a bad idea. So if I am producing cells the 3rd week of March, they're not going to go on a mating flight at that time. They're just being dropped into the cell. The cells are just being dropped. And I'm sorry, I've said this incorrectly. I dropped the cells the 3rd week of March. So we're fixing to graft this coming week. And then, but the queens still aren't mating till around the 1st, which is our honey flow. But April 1st is pretty much when I get my honey flow here. It's always surprised me that I'm actually ahead of Bob, but we do warm up quicker. We're much lower of elevation, and our autumn olives bloom earlier than Bob's do. So, and do you have autumn olive much, Bob?
A little bit. It's starting to show up a little more every year. 10 years ago, I didn't even know what it was, but now I see it here and there.
Yeah, when areas where it's thick, you can get a super in a good year off of autumn olive.
Yeah, it's good honey too.
Yeah, it is a good honey. And so, Cameron, that's what I'm doing. But if it's your first time grafting, or you're not in a rush, maybe wait another week. Maybe wait till early April to begin. Just sometimes, when you really push the season, you run into some cool weather systems that come through. And if you're not in a big rush, sometimes wait an extra week or two, as long as you're not desperate for those queens. It won't hurt.
Yeah, it's better to wait.
Hey, Matt Clark. And again, I want to say thanks to everybody who's joined this chat with Bob and I, and thanks for the questions. We're going to try to breeze through several. Follow up on the package question. Put them all on drawn comb, or put some foundation in there as well. Bob, what's your thoughts?
Well, if you have drawn comb, they'll move ahead quicker, but it's fine if you have a few drawn comb for the center that they can get started on, and then to put foundation on the outside and let them draw it out. It's almost as good, as long as they've got something to start on in the center. That's the main thing.
when we've gotten packages in the past and we didn't have enough comb for everybody, but we did have some, we would just put 2 combs in each one because that's all we could give them, and the rest had to be foundation. But just those 2 drawn combs made a huge difference on the speed of which they were able to pump out more brood. And of course, you're on a timeline. It's those bees are getting older by the day, and so the more you can get out of those bees as quickly as you can, it's all about momentum, I suppose. But
Yeah.
Chris, next question. When bringing a new comb, should I leave it in the nuke box and open the entrance and leave them in the yard for 24 hours or so before transferring them to their new beehive?
If it's convenient, I say yes. Let them settle in, start to fly a bit. If you bring them home and open them up immediately and try to transfer them, the bees are kind of perturbed. So if you can wait a day, that's I would choose that.
Definitely keep them cool on the trip home. Don't go into Cracker Barrel for 2 hours or Bucky's and
Yeah.
let them get too hot. And that's the number one way to kill a nuke, is for it to get too hot. And so watch for that. And what I would do, Jessica, and this is what I've done for years whenever we've brought our own nukes to restock a yard or whatever, is have your hive already set up. If you're going to put them in a single deep box, have that lid and the bottom board already on the stand, and then just put your nuke right on top of that lid and open it up there with the entrance facing your other entrance. Because whenever you drop them into that box the next day, they'll be able to adjust 10 inches, 12 inches down into the wooden entrance. And in that way, there's no really big adjustment for the bees at all.
Yeah.
Oh, I really appreciate you saying that. Our nuke follow along video is just really simple video on how to get your nukes going. There's just a lot of fundamentals. They're fairly basic, but we had someone comment today, and it's been 23 years since I was a first-time beekeeper now, and a lot of times you forget the uncertainty on the basic fundamental stuff because we just done it now for so long. Sometimes you forget that at one point you were sitting there scratching your head going, I wonder if this is right or not. And many times you can be right, but it's still frustrating not being sure. And so that's where I appreciate Bob doing inspection videos and kind of showing how things look. And I try to do the same.
So you'll love this, Kamon. All of the packages that we're selling, we're giving the buyer a little piece of paper with some advice. And we're putting a link to your video on how to install a package that you made about 3 years ago. Two versions of how to install a package. Do you remember that video?
I do. That's been one of my more popular videos. And we had done a lot of different packages. And of course, the traditional way I learned from Walter T. Kelly's book, you just open them up, shake them in basically, and you put the queen between a couple frames and Bob's your uncle. And sorry, I couldn't help myself. And then eventually we were like, why do we have to shake him out of here? Can we just leave some space in there? And as long as it's warm weather, just let them walk themselves out, and it's a little less disruptive. And it's really, I think, more pleasant on everybody. But it's definitely ill-advised to do that if it's very cool weather. So I really like to do that when the highs are in the 50s and you get them installed in the morning, let them work their way out over to the queen. Or if it's going to be even hotter in, around 70, then, just stick them in an oven evening. And you just want to make sure that the main thing is if you put the queen over to the side, and I know you know this, Bob, but you can't let that queen sit alone for a few hours in the cold of the night. There needs to be some bees on her. So if it's warm outside, you stick her over there, the other bees can get over there and will go after. The only time I've ever seen it where they won't go over and quickly cover that queen and keep her warm is when there's another queen in that package. And then you'll come back a day or two later, and unfortunately you'll find that queen dead, typically the one in the cage, and that's because they wouldn't cluster around her. And they usually haven't left the package much either. They'll sometimes even build comb in the package, and sure enough, there'll be a marked queen or something in there they accidentally shook in. So Well, thanks for sharing my video, Bob. That means
Yeah,
a lot to me.
a good one.
Tips on combining a nuke with gentle bees with a double deep with more aggressive bees to keep the gentle queen alive.
Newspaper method works pretty good for something like that, provided that the queen has been removed in the colony below. Yeah, I would say newspaper method. We need to explain that. Why don't you explain that, Kamon?
Well, first of all, make sure it doesn't have any political stuff because there's already enough parasites in the hives as it is. But the newspaper is really easy. I am going to be releasing another video, but I have a couple videos on that. And if you can find a newspaper, that can be the trickiest part about this, Bob, is finding some.
Yeah.
But you
Well,
can get some other paper, craft paper,
paper towels work.
paper towels. There's a couple tricks I found with it. It's a lot easier when it's this time of the year or during a flow because the bees are less aggressive and it's easier for them to accept bees and others. But if I'm in a dearth period and I'm combining a good 3-frame nuke with the queen, and I've got a really powerful colony that's a very aggressive type of hive, I'm probably going to go ahead and cage the queen as well. And because sometimes I've still lost them, but most of the time, all you have to do is put the newspaper down in there between the bottom hive and the top. Just make a couple pin holes in there where the bees can begin to get access. And I like to put feed through a jar on the top colony so that their bellies are full. And that as they go through that paper, they're kind of bringing gifts down to the bottom colony below. And everyone's just kind of happy to get along with each other. But that's the number one way we actually fool with queens anymore is I always make up a bunch of spare nukes sometime in May. And these extra nukes, anytime I have a queen issue, I just plug them in the summertime. So newspaper method works good. There's also some push in cages, and I really think those are quite handy too. They're a little bit more labor intensive. You have to go back in and release the queen later, but if a couple extra days sometimes, especially on a really aggressive colony, might be worth it. Just a thought. When I was talking to Ray, this is a question I had for you, Bob. This is my question. It's my turn, Chris. I was talking to Ray, and we were talking about queen introductions. And of course, I was asking him questions because he handles a lot of queens, and I know you have as well. And so for a lot of the beekeepers in here, Ray said that it's no matter how much experience you have, the easiest colonies to get queens accepted in are smaller colonies. As far as introducing a queen from them or you to a double deep or introducing it into a 2 or 3 frame split, it's easier to get acceptance. Would you think that's the case or not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. These days we're doing a lot of if we're going to requeen a colony eventually this season, we'll start a small nuke over a double screen board. I did some of that today and get it started. There's another beauty to starting a nuke over a double screen board, and that is that you also lose all the field force. They go home. So now you're really going to have good queen acceptance upstairs because, as you know, it's the older bees that are mean and aggressive. And if you're worried about robbing, you can stuff a little bit of green grass in the entrance of the double screen board so that only one bee can come and go. And in short order, the older bees have found their way back to the bottom, and queen acceptance can be quite good that way. And then later, we'll let that nuke grow for a while. And then later on, we'll kill the queen below and recombine the 2 deep boxes. And I really like doing that. Did a lot of it last year. And if you let the nuke up above go long enough, it can be kind of a colony all by itself. And when you combine the 2 colonies, you can really have a colony and a half. And if your timing is right, if you do this whole thing right, you can split the lower colony and make a nuke up above and prevent swarming by splitting, and then let the nuke up above grow up for a few weeks. And at just the right time, as the honey flow starting, go down, kill the queen below, recombine the upper nuke with the bottom, and suddenly you've circumvented swarming. You've requeened the colony, and now you have a colony and a half at just the right time to produce a ton of honey. It works. Timing is important, of course, and it's work. It's there's some labor involved.
Sure. Well, that sounds like a good idea. And so when it comes to, let's say you've made this double screen board nuke, or let's say that you've just split some bees off into a nuke 5-frame nuke box and you're putting in a mated queen, how quickly would you check back on those mated queens typically, Bob?
Well, we wait 7 or 10 days generally, at least a week, because you don't want to disturb it too soon. When you introduce a queen, quite often those queens are nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And if you open a colony too early, too soon, the combination of the queen being nervous and the bees perhaps being a little upset because you opened them, you can end up losing a queen. The queen needs to lay for a little while. That's the key. Even if it's just 5-7 days, once she's laid for a little bit, then it's okay to open it up and have a look. It's really tempting to go back in 3 or 4 days and see if she's out and she's laying, but that's the wrong thing to do. You need to wait just a little longer, let her lay a little while, and then the bees will tolerate you open up the colony without them balling their own queen.
That's really good advice, and it's something that took me years to learn. That one, I learned it the hard way multiple times, and you'd open it up and all of a sudden you're sometimes you see your queen being balled and you're like, well, what's going on here? But oftentimes it was checking on a queen, 4 days, afterwards, 3 or 4 days afterwards. And what I've come to learn is that a lot of what, like you said, she's nervous. So her mannerisms physically are communicating that she's a good queen, but also her brood pheromones, her specific, the brood that she's laid, helps solidify the deal. And so when you give her time to lay, and it takes 3.5 days for her eggs to hatch. And now after a couple of days of that, you're starting to get these brood pheromones that are also helping cement this queen as the queen of the hive. It's just being impatient is not a good idea in these situations.
In this case, yes.
Yes. Okay. What happened, Chris? It disappeared. Keith Spillman said something. Kamon and Bob, y'all concerned about the freeze next week hurting your season?
Well, I could be concerned, but I'm just not. I'm just done worrying about the little things, and maybe it'll be a bad thing in the long run, but I just learned not to worry about things, do the best I can, and take it as it comes. Yeah, it could have an effect. It could have an effect in some interesting ways too. Those drones you were talking about earlier, if it gets cold enough, long enough, they're going to start kicking those things out and perhaps devouring some of the drone brood. I'll tell you a fun little story that happened about 20 or 25 years ago in Georgia.
It doesn't sound like a fun story to me.
You like the stories? Okay.
It doesn't sound like a fun story. You're already talking about drones getting
Yeah,
cannibalized.
it isn't a fun story. It's an enlightening story, actually.
Okay. Here we
There's
go.
a couple lessons in it. So a couple decades ago, we had a very warm winter, and the bees all over the lower half of Georgia came out of winter in really good condition, brooded up early. Everything was running early. The colonies were boiling with bees, and everybody down there, all the producers were grafting and starting to create queens and all of that. And then suddenly we had about a 7-day, very historical type of cold spell come in, and they cannibalized all the drone brood, and some of the drones that had already hatched got kicked out. And we had these massive colonies, 2-story colonies, literally boiling with bees, going well into what would be considered swarming season. But they were almost none of them were showing any sign of swarming. And the lesson that taught me is that the colonies were waiting for the drones to come back again before they started creating swarm cells. And of course, some of the queen producers completely ignored this and just put out cells on time and didn't really have the drones in the air to mate properly. And just because you get mated with 1 or 2 drones doesn't mean you have a good queen. It might even have a good pattern, but you get an excessive amount of supersedure a little later. And it was very interesting that the colonies would not swarm weeks into what would be considered the normal swarming season. They were waiting for the next crop of drones to come on before they would do it.
And Keith, all I have to say in regards to concern about the freeze is, first of all, like kind of Bob alluded to, what are you going to do about it? You can either be upset or you can just, I guess chill. And I know Keith's that way too, but One of the things I found interesting is you have some of these years you're like, oh man, this is going to be a terrible year. And it somehow ends up being a good year. And then I've had some years where we've just had phenomenal Aprils. And that was last year. That last year's April was picture perfect. I had so much honey being made. Even my nukes, I was frustrated. My nukes were getting plugged out from all the honey we were getting in April. And I was actually couldn't hardly enjoy the honey flow for my nukes getting packed out. But then in May, we got like 11 inches of rain scattered all over the month. They ended up eating some of their food in April, and we got washed out in May. So it ended up being a way below average yield because that's half of our flow. So, I thought it was going to be a bumper crop year and ended up being a low one. So you just don't know what you're going to get until you get it. So we got a bunch of questions. Let's try to bust through a couple of these. So here's a question also by Jason Hughes. Hey, Bob, did you try any heather honey while you were out there in Scotland?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. I like it. And of course, that's their premium honey that they brag about, and rightfully so. I thought it was good honey. Most of the honey that you purchase in Scotland is actually, we would call it cream honey. They use a term that I actually like better. They call it soft set. I think that's more correctly descriptive than saying it's creamed. The word creamed is really misleading to the general public. They want to, well, what'd you do? Did you put cream in there? What'd you do? But soft set is what they call it. And they have, what I saw on the store shelves, over 75% of it was soft set.
Mm-hmm. So Jason has another question. Can you go into more depth about making spring splits with walkaways versus grafted queens? What's your thoughts on that, Bob?
Well, walkaway splits can be problematic in the queen colony. I've made hundreds and hundreds of them back when I was broke and I wanted to expand my outfit. It is, generally speaking, it's not across the board in every case, but generally speaking, the queen quality will be a little lower in walkaway splits than when you're comparing it to a properly raised queen. Now, there are a few tricks that you can do to a walkaway split that will enhance the queen quality, kind of up the odds of having a good situation. One is to feed it thin sucrose syrup while they are developing their queen. When we make queen cells and graft at our place, even during a nectar flow, we will add thin sucrose syrup, and we're pretty convinced that it actually gives us better results than even just a nectar flow. I don't know why, I don't understand it. And so feeding very thin syrup, like 1.5 parts water to 1 part sugar, will enhance the situation. And then also make sure they've got some fresh pollen, like this year's pollen, not a comb that you put in the freezer and saved over the winter. Make sure they've got lots of good fresh pollen, because that's really key to making good queens. And then shake in a bunch of extra young bees. Take 2 or 3 frames of open brood that are, have a lot of young nurse bees on them, and shake those into your walkaway split before you walk away with it. And they're the bees that are going to make your good queen. And then also, come back in about 4 days and look at the queen cells. You're going to have some that look really good and some that look really poor. And on that 4th day, you're actually going to have some that are sealed and some that are not sealed. Pick the best looking cells. And if you have some unsealed cells that look really good, I would leave those, because those, of course, would have been produced from younger larvae. In most cases, a walkaway split will use larvae that are not over 48 hours old, but it does occasionally happen. And of course, once a larva gets up to beyond 36 hours, the diet is beginning to change. And by 48 hours, the larva is being fed something called brood food, which is different than royal jelly. It's not the same chemical makeup. So if you can go do those 3-4 things, you can actually have a better experience with a walkaway split.
That was really good information. So I just wanted to say howdy to this young beekeeper right here, 14 years old, and he's got 2 nukes coming in May.
Wow.
And it looks like getting real busy. So congratulations and all that. Good luck with your bees. I hope you stick around and keep asking more questions. We definitely are. I started when I was 15 and 14, 15, somewhere around there. And I know Blake Shook started when he was like 12. And so it's,
Mhm.
just be patient. You have a lot of learning to do, and that's part of the process. But if you stick with it, I think you'll find that you're really happy with it. Brian, thank you so much for being one of our members, and also for
Oh,
supporting other youths as well and this YouTube channel. Um, I saw that your comment about New Jersey tomatoes being better than all other tomatoes. I've never heard anyone utter those words. I didn't know they grew tomatoes in New Jersey hardly. Um, I just heard they have rough characters up there. That's all I know about New Jersey. And Brian's one of them. He comes to the show, and then he's like, "What do you need, Kamon? What do you need?" And I'm like, "Well, we've got this issue with the people getting in the doors over there." He's like, "I'm all over it, pal. I've got it." And we know we're just hoping he doesn't send anybody to the hospital. Um, no, Brian's a great guy. He's one of the few people that have been with us every single year at the show. And Bob, of course, you've been with us at the expo every single year.
yeah, it's fun. Hope you're going to have me back next year. I'm already telling people I'll be there.
Well, we're weighing the options, Bob. We'll get back to you. Don't call me. I'll call you.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'll work.
We're gonna have a great lineup this year. We're already well underway with our speakers, and I'm excited. So, Roy Boyd, who's been with us for a while as well, is it okay to leave bottled honey in a hot box around 90 degrees Fahrenheit until you can sell it, including honey with comb, or does it affect the taste and temperature and the color at that temperature and the color?
Well, I like to say when we're talking about changes in honey, it always has an equation involved. It's not just temperature, it's also time. 90 degrees in itself is not a big deal, but if it's there for a long time, it is a big deal. The taste changes with time, the flavor, taste, flavor, the color, the aroma, the enzymes deteriorate. 90 degrees for months is a bad practice. You're basically killing your honey. If it's just for a few days, not a big deal. And I actually have some numbers in my head that I've memorized. One of the enzymes in honey is diastase. And if you store your honey at 122 degrees Fahrenheit you reach the half-life in 2 weeks. If you store it at 179, you reach the half-life in 30 seconds. If you store it at 68 degrees, the half-life is 1,000 days. So if you use those numbers and kind of do a little quick math, you can see that 90 degrees is not, in itself, is not real detrimental. But if you leave it there a long time, it can really have some bad influence.
Well, and of course, if you leave it on the hives for months, it's probably going to be 90 to 100 degrees in a lot of places too.
That's exactly right.
So,
when you go online and somebody's making the bold statement that 94 degrees kills all enzymes, they're leaving half the information out. Yeah, it does, but there's also time involved in the equation.
and if I remember pulling honey out of a hive that had been sitting in one location unopened for almost 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And the honey was very dark. I've never produced dark honey, and it was only 2 miles from where I live. So the honey color shouldn't have been that different. And it was pitch black. It looked like it was fairly degraded, but it was sitting in there, and it was thick and it was strong, and it kind of felt like it was old honey.
Well, here's a fun fact, and I think I got this right out of Hive and the Honeybee, that big fat encyclopedia type of book that's out there. When you raise the temperature of honey 10 degrees Fahrenheit, the rate at which it turns darker triples. Now, when you go from 30 to 40 degrees, that's not a big deal. But when you go from 40 to 50, it's a little different. 50 to 60, so on. What's the word? Exponential. By the time you're going from 90 degrees to 100 degrees, it's the rate at which it's darkening is tripling. So this is something to remember. And all parts of honey deteriorate in much the same way, much the same fashion. As it gets hotter and longer, everything's going downhill fast.
Sure. And what I've learned from some producers, some of this information comes from you and some of it from other commercial beekeepers. Not all honeys darken at the same rate either. Orange blossom darkens pretty quick. And of course, some crystallize within a couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
some take years and some never do. And that's really what's fun about beekeeping, is there's always something new to learn, but it's also kind of hard to say this is the only way, because it's,
Hey,
you can't
hey,
hardly.
Damon, I got a question for you. Have I ever done? I have a PowerPoint that's entitled "The Chemistry Behind Processing Honey." Have I ever done that at the expo? It doesn't seem like I have.
Well, you've been there 6 years, Bob, so you've covered a lot of stuff.
Maybe
That's
I've done it. It would
you,
be a good one if I've not done it. I would suggest letting me do that this coming year.
well,
It's a good one.
you have. It doesn't mean we can't
Oh, yeah.
revisit it,
Okay.
but
I don't have to worry
you
about that.
do 2 a year, and that's 12 lectures. I think there's been some years in the early years you were doing 3, and because we didn't hardly have anybody. But if it's been 5 or 6 years maybe since you've done it, it's fairly new. So
Okay.
we'll we'll look into it. Honestly, Bob, at this point, if you just want to say, I'm just gonna shoot pot shots at Kamon Reynolds on the live chats, well, we can't say no to you coming anyways. At this point, it's whatever you want.
Well, maybe I'm being a little too presumptuous here. Maybe I'm just assuming I'm coming. Maybe I need to find out more information first before I broadcast
Well,
that.
when you get to be 100 years old, we're gonna have to review your contract, but until that point, you don't have to worry about it, Bob.
All right. I
Um,
haven't embarrassed myself too badly yet. If I start embarrassing myself on stage, I'll just bow out.
That's
You
You
know.
haven't embarrassed anybody but me on stage, Bob. But only in the good ways. It's always been funny and well timed. I got roasted by you, Fred, and Randy this year, and that was a lot of fun. And in the past, you've roasted me, and of course I've roasted you. So it's all fair
Ooh,
game, and I enjoy it. And a lot of our crowd understands that's how we roll. So
yeah.
um, I have a question. If bees don't move eggs, as people say, how does an egg get from a regular cell against the foundation to the bottom of a queen cell that is away from the foundation? Personally, I
Well,
think the bees move the eggs into a queen cell once it's started.
well, I'm not an expert on this. I've read some articles in the bee journals by people that swear that it happens, and a couple of the people that say that are serious researchers, so there might be something to that. Or a colony that's queenless for a long time suddenly has a queen cell that seems
Mhm.
to be legitimate. How do they do that?
Well, it makes you sometimes. I've wondered if a queen's not performing well. Maybe that's why there's a supersedure going on. Maybe she's still in there, but she's not performing well. Are we already seeing the beginnings of a little bit of laying workers? It's
Yeah.
just they're removing a lot of these eggs um, most of the time, and so we never notice because it never makes it into it. I don't know. There's so many crazy things that go into those beehives. That's why we enjoy doing it. It's because we haven't got it figured out, but we're trying. So, Michael Palmer. Well, Michael, thank you for joining us. Yes, push in cages, nearly 100% acceptance. And Michael Palmer was one of the guys that really pushed the idea of push in cages into my brain. I had always thought, I'd seen him kind of from afar and thought it was just something that was kind of a novelty thing, and no one of any size was using them. But Michael runs quite a few hives in Vermont, and I actually was enjoying a little bit of his linden honey that was left over from the honey bar, and that is really good stuff. Which is basswood, by the way, for those of you who don't know. So push-in cages are really easy to make too. You can make your own, or you can purchase some, and they can give you a little bit more time.
Well, there's a problem with some of the commercially available push-in cages.
Okay.
You need a cage that's deep enough to where you can push it to the midrib all the way so the bees can't chew underneath it. I've noticed that some of the plastic cages that are available don't do that. They need to be almost an inch deep to do that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the commercially produced plastic ones are not deep enough.
What I've seen with a couple of the plastic ones, they're probably coming from China.
Yeah.
They look pretty cheap and they don't last very long, but they'll have little feet on them on the corners, maybe in the midsection. And so the feet go all the way to the midrib of the plastic foundation or the wax foundation, but it's like this high up off the feet for the rest of it. And the bees can tunnel sometimes underneath there and get to the queens faster than you would like. Or, I mean, I'd rather them not get to the queens until I come back and release her. So I honestly think there's a little bit of an opportunity for someone who already has the tools to reach out to someone like Michael and a couple other beekeepers that use them regularly and design a push-in cage that's affordable, but also is going to last and do the job properly.
Yeah.
The problem of it is a lot of the people who are designing these products are not the ones using them. And so whether it's an excluder or a push-in cage or whatever, we get what we get, and half the time what we get's not very good.
So I can see it already. The Reynolds push-in cage.
Heck no. I have no desire to be manufacturing product. I'll leave that to the other crazy people in this industry. So I'll be moving about a 3-hour drive. I'm taking my 14 hives. Should I cage the queens to protect them during transport?
Well, if you want to go to all that trouble, it can't hurt. Let's put it that way. Just a fun fact. Of course, this is an extreme example, but when I used to send semi-truck loads of bees to California from Georgia, I could count on a 5 to 7% queen loss, but that's a long trip. It's a little different matter than just a 3-hour drive, and semi-trucks aren't the most gentle. But yeah, even in a simple move, there is the chance of losing a queen. Even if the frames aren't rattling around, sometimes the bees get excited and ball their own queen.
Well,
So
maybe
if you're willing to go through the trouble, do it. But I don't, because I'm not willing to go through the trouble, but it can't hurt.
That would be probably a case where a push-in cage would be nice too, if you wanted to do that, where you just push it around her and then just remove it afterwards instead of having to catch her and put her in a little cage. Yeah, if Bob's not the Expo, there might be, right? I don't think there's any mite to it. If Bob or the coffee station goes away, what do you say? You like that person?
Well, I like that person.
Yeah, he's going to be picketing out front of the Bee Expo. No Bob, no Expo.
Okay. Oh, now there's a tip right there.
Yeah. So apparently we have our shtick for what we need to be producing more of.
This is new to me. This is foreign to my nature. Until I got involved with you, I was not this way. I'm still not this way very much, but I kind of had to defend myself and start doing that, behaving differently around you.
It's part of our culture in my family, but also in a lot of parts of this region. Not everybody, of course, but many of us show affection by picking on one another, and in a clean way, but also fun. And that's what my grandpa did. It's what my other grandpa did to me. My dad and mom a little bit less, but they still do that. And my brothers and we show affection by oftentimes making fun of one another. Yeah. So I think as long as it's understood that it's meant well, it's all fun and fine. But sometimes you go to these places where that is not part of the culture, and they take it very personally. So you have to kind of be careful. So typically when I go out to bigger cities, I have to turn it off a little bit more, because they don't get the country jokes.
Yeah.
But it's all just harmless fun.
Well, my problem is when I get around people like you, is I'm such an easy target. I just too easy.
Well, there's so much to work with. You have.
Well, there you go.
You're not an easy target, Bob. I'm just so highly skilled at this that anyone is a target.
Practice makes perfect. Yes, I know.
37 years of a master class from my grandfathers, passed down and distilled into the most perfect cut up, and that is yours truly. So, all right, let's get back to some questions. So I'm going to, well, thank you, Brian. Thanks for being one of our members as well and for asking questions. I want to just say this really quick. This is up at minute mark 7:38. Kamon, please do a video on traps and all of this hornet info. So, of course, I am learning along with you guys. I'm going to be bringing Brad Cavan and more people to the expo, but also I'm going to be bringing Brad on so that he can be instructing everybody who's in Georgia, South Carolina, and the neighboring states, or anywhere, who wants to evaluate their recommendations on what to look for. They also do have some trap recipes that they found have worked really well. And we will be keeping you guys up to date on this. There was a question like, so it sounds like it's here permanently. And I talked to them about that yesterday. And You know, that the problem is it came into one of the best locations in the country for this pest. Of course, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, these are areas where insects perform very good. It's very mild. There's a lot. We have so many insects in northern Georgia and South Carolina, and that's what they need. They need a lot of food. They need mild climates. So they can grow these massive populations, and they'll shoot off 100 queens. Part of the problem is too is there's a lot of swamp country in some of those areas as well, and rough terrain, and it's some of those areas are very hard to access. And so I think there was an opportunity a couple of years ago. The problem is we don't have the infrastructure in beekeeping to be able to do what we need to do as quickly as we need to. We can't rely on the government. I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus, because guys like Brad are awesome and working hard, but they're understaffed, they're underfunded. The reaction time of them getting resources and being allowed to do everything that they needed to do is not where it needs to be. And also, this is just a difficult pest, but you had a very short window when it comes to these kinds of things to get it. And so now I think it's about slowing it down, and also we need to be serious again as an industry about protecting ourselves and developing our own solutions. The government is not going to take any notice of us, and they're not going to help us create any products. We got to start taking care of ourselves, but we don't have much organization at all, and we don't have, seems to be a whole lot of leadership when it comes to this. So that is something that we're going to try to fix. And I don't want to do it, but someone's got to, and gosh dang it, it's got to happen. So what process would you suggest for temperature when bottling from a crystallized bucket?
Well, honey goes completely liquid at around 104, 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So the idea is if you don't want it to crystallize again, you need to melt all those crystals when you're bottling. We kind of shoot for 110, occasionally 120, depending on the type of honey. I hate to heat honey. I really do, because I know what I'm doing when I do heat it. So I try to go as fast and as fast as I can, as minimal heat as I can. If you can get the entire bucket, and I don't just mean the surface, even the center has to be 110 degrees, you'll melt all the crystals. That'd be a good temperature to bottle at.
Let's see here.
Unless you want soft set honey.
You know, and that's what I'm talking to a lot of people who are getting more and more into creamed honey, and a lot of it was because they really struggled to keep their honey from crystallizing. Just the makeup is, it just naturally wants to crystallize. So they're like, I'm just going to go ahead and make soft set honey. I'm going to get a creamer, and they found it's been really good for them, because you know they'll end up producing maple creamed honey, which this is delicious. This is cream pals in Quebec. This is cinnamon honey right here, creamed honey. I've got chocolate fudge, which tastes like fudge. And, you know, Bob, I got to share this. There's a lot of honeys out there where everyone brags. It's got hints of peach and notes of rose hips. And, you know, just like a wine where they brag and say it's this amazing experience. And then you take a sip of the wine and you're like, that's it. That's the way I feel about a lot of honeys. But this one lives up to the hype, and this is meadow foam.
Oh, yeah. I remember meadow foam in Oregon used to make it.
Yeah, this comes from Washington, and I've always wanted to get my hands on it. And my buddy with Apis Tactical got a hold of some, and I said, oh, man, I'd love to get that contact. He said, well, let me just send you my jar I just got, and I'll buy another one. And so he did, which is very nice of him. And I've always heard it has kind of a marshmallow-like flavor to it. And it does. It actually really does. And it smells like it too.
Yeah. So when I was in Oregon, in the Willamette Valley, I used to pollinate cabbage seed crops, and it tastes the same way. It reminds you of marshmallows or taffy. It was extremely good. Who knew that cabbage flour would make that kind of honey? But it was much like meadow foam.
It's awesome. And so again, the world of honey and beekeeping is even more cooler, and that is a delicious honey. And I let two of my buddies try it today who didn't hear me talk about it. I said, taste this, and let me know what you think it tastes like. And one of them said marshmallows, the other one said cotton candy.
Yeah.
And that's just really, really cool. Who else has such a diversity in flavors of honeys or anything? So that question was, is the expo always in Kentucky? So it has been the last few years. We're planning to have it the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes.
Yes. So we are still working through a couple of details, but 99.9% sure it's going to be there again this year. We're just trying to get some food stuff ironed out so we can make the show better, and a few other odds and ends to expand and have more offerings, especially in the workshops, because people seem to really want that. So we're just trying to do the best we can there. But yes, probably going to be in Louisville again this year unless something crazy happens. Kamon, love the beekeeping information as always, but would love to see/hear more of your music as well. You and the crew have genuine talent. I really appreciate you saying that. I am going to be actually recording an intro with my brother for our Grow 365 channel, and I'm considering having a very short 5-second intro of music for our beekeeping channel as well. But I just don't have any spare time. I started this morning to about 12 and a half hours ago, and we're still going. I love what I do, but unfortunately the music just really takes a back seat, and it's kind of a bummer, but it's just that way. I hope that I can maybe do a little bit more in the future. All right. So I was talking to a couple of folks. I really am keeping my ear to the ground on this Tropilaelaps situation, Bob. And I have some interesting news for you. So, and I'm going to share it with everybody else. So we were talking, I can't name names right now, but they will be announced and probably at my show. And
if I have to, I'm going to mute your mic. I'm just warning.
Chris is going to get some type of shepherd's crook and yank me off here in a second. But there are areas where they are finding where people have had it for a while. These aren't English speaking countries, most of them. And so it's difficult to get the information on what's going on because, we just don't communicate with these countries, and they don't with us very much, especially in regards to beekeeping. They are finding a certain degree of control with them over there. Supposedly, this is very, very recent information. However, they're still having to treat about every 6 to 8 weeks. And there are some promising things with some of the acids, but also we manage our bees different over here, especially commercially, where they need bigger bees to go pollinate these crops, especially the early ones. And so it's encouraging to see that there are beekeepers that are living with it. The style of beekeeping seems to have maybe changed. It's hard to get all the information, but we are seeing progress in getting some communication to these people, and also what they're trying and what seems to be working. They're having some overwintering success that's pretty good. But we're going to continue to dig into that information and get more. Again, all this is very preliminary, and just like with everything, sometimes you think you know something and then it ends up being different. So obviously more work needs to be done, but we are getting a product in place to be tried on Tropilaelaps this year, in the country of Georgia. And so it is designed for that problem and can be adjusted accordingly throughout the season. I'm very excited that we're getting some of that stuff in. We're also I'm talking to the Naroa folks, and I am going to be trying their product out. They'll be coming to our apiary, and we're going to try a full bee yard with Naroa this year. We're going to be applying it before the honey flow starts, because you don't want to feed it when there's a honey flow going on, because it dilutes the product down. You need to make sure it gets in the brood and the mites get well exposed to it. And we'll see how well it shuts things down. It's supposed to do a good job, and I'm hoping that it does, because if it does do a good job, maybe it'll work on Tropilaelaps with a little bit of tweaking for that. And if you could get a shutdown of 3 to 4 months on Tropilaelaps, that would be a really nice advantage to have.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on all that stuff, Bob, or just
Not much, no. I'm kind of watching this Naroa stuff. I haven't tried it yet.
Sure.
People have called me wanting to have me try it, but I'm just going to stand aside and watch this one for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lot. All of what most of us can do is just kind of see what's going on. I'm hoping that we can schedule a time to actually go to Georgia this year. We're talking to
Oh,
a
yeah.
couple of them, the country of Georgia, for those who don't
Yeah.
know. I know. And so we're hoping to get some firsthand experience on what's going on. So, whew, but
Hey Bob, here's a good one for you.
okay.
As a co-packer of honey, so obviously you don't just pack your own honey. You purchase some and everything. Here's a really interesting opinion, and the chat has lots of opinions as well. But let's get yours.
I'm puzzled why he wouldn't want to buy blended honey. He doesn't give us a reason. Maybe there's a legitimate reason there. I don't know what it would be, but that's also correct that there's almost no such thing as pure anything when it comes to honey. It's almost all, at least to some minor degree, a blend. Frames can have multiple sources, so his logic has a problem. Yeah, I would probably agree with that one. Even some of these really premium crops like Tupelo and sourwood, it's hard to keep it, 100% pure. I just don't think you can. I don't know why you wouldn't want blended honey. I'm not sure how to answer that one.
I guess, of course, if someone has the wrong idea and thinks that it's part funny honey with real honey, then, well, if that's what they're thinking, then,
then
yeah,
that's legitimate.
Yeah, well, but they're incorrect in blanketing everything, because there are commercial beekeepers that I know. This was a bad year for it, but some years where the almonds have a long bloom, you can make some almond honey sometimes. But almond honey is, in my opinion, a very disgusting honey. It's
pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. It's got some very bitter aftertastes to it. And so a lot of beekeepers find that if you blend even just a little bit of clover or some other types of honey with it, it really gets rid of that bitter note.
Yeah. We blend a lot of honey. As you know, I buy honey from different parts of the country and blend it together. But we also, produce and purchase our local honey and try to keep it as local. We try not to put anything else with it, keep it as local as possible. But our spring wildflower is quite blended. I wouldn't even know what to guess how many flowers are in that spring. We call it our mountain wildflower. I don't even know what to guess how many flowers would be in that. Dozens, probably.
Yeah, I only take one crop because I could try it. I could pull off some earlier stuff. And when I've tried that years ago, I was able to get a little bit of a lighter honey. It tasted semi-similar. It'll be a little bit more autumn olive, black locust where we can, and it'll be a little bit lighter, but it's a lot of extra work. And my honey still sells really good just as one collar, a mix. And so it's our entire season extracted all in one shot.
I would do the same thing if it wasn't for sourwood. The first year I was in Georgia, I didn't know about sourwood being more valuable, and I let everything run together. It was tulip poplar and blackberry, and also quite a bit of sourwood that year, and it was really wonderful honey. If it wasn't for the price of sourwood, I probably wouldn't go through the trouble of trying to keep it separate.
Well, it definitely is a premium honey, and it's also one of the honeys that I think lives up to the hype. It has a really good flavor. Tupelo honey is a really good honey too. I love the Tupelo that I got from you, and I know that Eric on here from Colorado mentioned that when he came to the show, he got some of your sourwood and the Tupelo that you sell, and he just said those were just really prime honeys.
Yeah.
So here's a question from the Minnesota beekeeper.
Okay.
Any thoughts on using a heavy canvas inner cover to provide a heavy propolis load in the hive? And he mentions Paul Kelly, and that's been one of our speakers in the past up there at the University of Guelph, and they use a heavy duck canvas, and they like it up there. Have you ever seen anything or tried that before, Bob?
I've not tried it. I've seen other people do it. You can do it with fiberglass window screen too. They might make more propolis with that than canvas, but there could very well be something to that. I preach about propolis all the time now. Having lots of propolis in the colony is actually a healthy thing. And if Canvas promotes that, then why not?
I have an overwintered colony that has a virgin queen. How should I handle this? Would they accept a newly mated one?
Yeah, well, if she's a virgin from the distant past, she needs to go because she's no good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've introduced queens into colonies with this situation right here. It's helpful to add a frame or two of open brood from other colonies if you have it, and perhaps leave your queen caged for a while. You know, if it's a introduction cage with candy, perhaps put a cap or some tape over it so they don't get her out right away. But you can accomplish this.
Well, we definitely have seen a couple this year. I did a video where we looked into a colony, and of course, I can't do a video now without getting ridiculed, and that's okay. I look forward to it at this point. It means I'm doing a good job.
I'm not used to the ridicule yet.
I'm not either. My wife will tell you, but it really depends on where it's coming from, and I am getting a lot better at it because it's just a daily occurrence now. Everyone can get access to me. Kamon, you should have done this different with the expo. That was stupid. Hey, Kamon, and that's an email. And of course, now some of it Chris is getting and Josh, they're getting that stuff. And then of course, all the YouTube comments and the Facebook comments and who knows where else. It's something. But we just do our best, and we just try to. That's all we can do. And so we had a colony that I crushed the queen in the video, and she looked good, and she had to have been good at some point, Bob, because they came out of winter with a good 7 to 8 frame cluster. It looked absolutely like a gorgeous cluster of bees. It may have been 9 to 10. It was huge. But she was laying a terrible pattern in a couple of the cells. It was drones as well. And I don't know if she ran out of gas in the winter, but somebody built that hive to overwinter that good. But it was terrible. And of course, we're looking at our other big colonies, and we're seeing at that point sheets of brood, beautiful patterns, and the pollen flow has been great here. So I used to try to baby those things and fix them back when I didn't know any better. But what ends up happening is these bees have a very finite amount of life left in them. And I can't wait. So I crushed the queen. I had a colony in the yard that was a very small one. It was about 4 frames of bees, 3.5, and it had a good queen laying a pattern in there. And I plugged it in with that newspaper method. And I'm going to go check back probably tomorrow and see if they took or not. But I imagine that they did. I gave them a little bit of feed. But that's when those situations, folks, a lot of times as a new beekeeper, it's a tough situation because you're a long way from sometimes getting a queen, and you need it now. And this is where my number one recommendation for someone who wants to be successful long-term in beekeeping is get to the point where you're splitting bees. That doesn't mean you have to be a queen producer, but let's say you have 3 hives. That's the number that you want to have. At some point in the year, your bees are going to be strong enough to produce a split or 2 from those 3 hives, and maybe 1 from each one. And you can purchase queens from Bob or Olivarez or somebody else, and you can make up some splits. And these are extra colonies. And you're like, well, yeah, but that's more than what I wanted. But whenever you have a queen issue, sometimes with these others, you already have something that you can fix it with immediately. And you're not having to wait a week or 2 to get a queen. And you also are introducing the whole package, a laying queen with her brood, with bees that can help sell her greatness to the other bees that they're combining with, and so much more, and giving that weak colony a boost. So that's my recommendations is everyone at some point needs to get into a position where you can make your own splits. So this is a Rainier. I don't know if you remember who he is, Bob, but he's the blonde-headed boy that's been at our expo a few times. And Rainier is working with Lincoln over there, going up to Maine and whatnot. And he just finished splitting for the Georgia season, made 134 splits between today and Tuesday.
Ambitious.
Yeah. And so he's, I think, what are you, Rainier, about fixing to turn 20 or something like that? So, you know, he's taller than me, but he still looks up to me quite a bit. Almost all the kids in that next gen program are taller than me, whether it's now or later. He was taller than me from the get-go. Hey, Kamon, I need to get a new veil and jacket. I'm looking at the Clearview veil. I wear reader glasses and have a little trouble with the veil I currently have. Any thoughts? I really like that round veil personally. It doesn't fold up as at all. So some people prefer the fencing veils for that reason. One thing I will say about the Clearview veil that's on the Man Lake suit is it is not priced. It is sized really large. So I typically wear either a medium or a small suit depending on who produces it. And when I got a medium from them, I think I could have done the backstroke in that suit without even touching fabric. It was huge. And they sent me a small to replace it, and it still feels like it's pushing a large. And so it works. So I don't, if you wear a medium or a large, I would probably, ask them about that, because it's a little bit on the large side. There's several different good options out there. Each one has a pro and a con. I love the veil. Some people say that when the wind blows, the mesh can get up against your neck and you could get popped there if they're really aggressive. I don't mind that a little bit because I like how good the visibility is, but I have one of those, and I also have other veils and options as well. So Bob, that's a great question. I wanted to ask you this tonight anyways. You wear these cotton old-fashioned beekeeping suits from the good old days, and
I do.
So we have all these vintage jackets. Everybody basically is using them, besides some of the commercial beekeepers from yesteryear. And is it just because you guys are that darn tough, or what is it?
It's probably a habit more than anything. I started with it, 45 years ago, and that was normal back then. And I've just worn it all these years. It feels comfortable. I like wearing a full bee suit because I take everything off when I put my bee suit on. So at the end of the day, I don't have dirty jeans and dirty shirts or anything like that. I just take my bee suit off and I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I asked, Bob.
But that's in summer now. In winter, I'll have other stuff underneath. But it's
sure.
habit more than anything, Kamon. People would cringe at this. I use a string veil, a folding veil, high quality folding veil, string veil, and I put a loop down. We sew a loop in the back. My wife sews a loop in the back down around the belt level of my bee suit, and the string goes down there and then up under my arms, and it's just what suits me, I guess, because I've been doing it for so long.
I
never did like the zipper veils. I never liked them.
Well, I like the fixed veils. Even though yours is different, I like the ones that are fixed, that aren't bobbing back and forth.
Yeah.
Because to me, I want the consistency that mesh is the same depth from my eyes at all times. What I found with the fencing veils, and they definitely work, but is that when you have a fencing veil that's constantly moving on you, or that's not attached to your head, whenever I turn my head, I'm still looking through the same part with your type of veil. But in a fencing veil, I'm looking over here into mesh, and half the time my right or my left eye can't see at all.
Don't like fencing veils at all. That's just me, though.
So that hopefully that helped that guy maybe make a decision on his suit. There's a lot of options out there, and obviously there's a lot of different opinions.
Yeah, we sell a variety of Clearview veil at our store too, and they sell well.
So Rainier's helped Lincoln make 1,020 splits in the last 2 weeks already. So, Rainier's not a commercial beekeeper yet, but he's trying. He'll get there one of these days, Bob. If he's working like that, he's going to be there really stinking fast. So thank you guys for all the videos. They have helped me out tremendously. I appreciate you saying that, Wesley. And here's a comment from that 14-year-old beekeeper. Bob, any tips to set up nucleus colonies after purchase?
Well, I'm a little stumped. Besides putting it in the box and feeding it, you might want to restrict the entrance a little bit until it gets to be a full-size colony and can defend the entire distance of an entrance. An entrance reducer of some sort might be helpful right off the bat. I feed thin syrup to nukes when I first get them and introduce them. A lot of people want to stretch them out, got a big fat nuke. Oh, let's put an empty comb down the middle. We'll make it grow faster. That's not a good idea unless you know what you're doing really well and the weather's really warm. In cold weather, that can be a bad thing to do. Good location, of course. Yeah.
Don't overfeed and don't underfeed. I think this is something that hobby beekeepers struggle with, and I did. I've had people who have purchased my nukes and they don't feed them at all. And sometimes, they're 2 hours north of me and the weather's not good and there's not a flow for 3 to 4 weeks after they get them. And those bees end up going backwards because they're just too low on food. And then we've had some folks that get them and we're in the middle of a great flow. One year to the next can be different. And so we typically sell early nukes, around the end of March. And then we have our later nukes at the end of April. So the difference in forage is often massive between those two times. And the temperature is too. And so we've had folks in April, we're in the middle, of entering our blackberry flow. We're having maybe some of the best flow of our year. And they put 2 gallons of feed on them at the same time on a 5-frame nuke. And they plug them out. And so this is where
another tip that seems very simple, but if you're a brand new beekeeper, a lot of people may not realize that the frames need to go in their new box in the same sequence that they came out of the nuke box. Occasionally I'll see people mix the frames up, by mistake. So that's something to pay attention to.
Yes, especially smaller colonies in cooler weather, even more. You can set them back accidentally by just moving a honey frame where a brood frame should be.
Sure can, yeah.
And so here's a question from Truly Lynn. Do you freeze your comb honey before filling it with honey? Like, I guess this would be a jar with comb honey in it.
Well, I'm reading the question. I don't read it that way. Do you freeze your comb before filling it with honey? Are they referring to freezing drawn out comb? If that's the question, it's not necessary. If you're talking about comb honey, putting it in a jar and then surrounding it with honey, yeah, we do. Yeah, in fact, that's how we store comb honey throughout the season. We rent freezer space and it never crystallizes in the freezer. So we've got comb honey right now in the freezer that's 6-8 months old, and it's just like the day we put it in, and we take out 10 or 20 supers at a time, depending on what we need for the next few weeks.
So let's see here. What do you think about a swarm? You catch it and put it back in the hive. And what do you think about a swarm you catch and you put it back in the hive that it comes from and take the swarm cell out? I don't fully.
Well, you could do that, I suppose. I don't see why you couldn't do that, but you'd have to definitely have all the cells out of there. I've not done that, so that's a trick question there, but I don't see why it wouldn't work.
So I want to say, I never did say thank you to this person. I can't pronounce their handle, but I do really appreciate them supporting everything that we're doing here. And we are trying to do a lot of crazy stuff. Let's see. We've got several people in here. We're going to go just a little bit longer, then we're going to let Bob get to his evening because, Bob needs his beauty sleep desperately. And
yes, I do.
We all do. Does anyone use hive wraps for the cold or cool weather? So I definitely don't.
I don't either. I know a lot of people do, and they feel that they get benefit from it. This year is the first year I've ever used insulated covers, and I buy into that concept. Kamon, you're familiar with the term condensing hive, and I buy into that. So next year you might see insulated covers on all my colonies. We'll see. I did it to the small ones this year, and I really saw that it made a difference.
we had someone that asked earlier about overwintering and doubles versus singles, and I think both both have worked well for me, and it really depends on the strength of the colony.
Yeah.
And we ran some singles through the winter. We took off the second box, put all the food in the bottom, and actually ran 8 frames with the frame feeder. Just left the frame feeder over there, and had really good success doing that. We put a little insulative reflectix. It's not much. It's just an R1 rating, but it helps seal that lid back, is a lot of it. And
Yeah.
a lot of them just had a migratory cover. And, we had more snow and cold weather this year than we've had in most years, and still had really good success. So going into winter with healthy bees is the number one thing that you can do to overwinter successfully. But of course, Bob and I don't live in northern Michigan or Montana, so that's a little bit different. And there's definitely people that live in those areas that would have a lot better advice to give for that kind of hard situation.
Yeah.
So let's see. All right, Chris, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. So if you asked a question way back 20, 30 minutes ago, I'm sorry if I've missed it, but I'm going to go down asking again because Chris wants to ignore the first time. It's definitely not Chris. It's because I'm 40 minutes behind on questions, I think, right now. So sorry about that.
I guess I just answered that, didn't I? Yeah.
Yeah. Did
I
Bob
did
see
see
that?
a benefit. It was really simple. I just didn't see the condensation on the underside of the covers. And with small colonies, that's important. You don't want moisture dripping down on a small cluster. And so for that reason, I feel like I saw benefit with the small colonies. Yeah, I've been overwintering colonies for 4.5 decades without them, so it's not like it's a big deal here.
Well, I think it's one of those things where the ones that are the most weak are going to see the most benefit from it, and your biggest ones probably aren't going to see a whole lot of difference from it.
Yeah, not here, but up north, again, you're right, be different.
And let's see, feed us a handful more of good questions. Chris, you've got some, don't you?
We're towards the end of it. We've answered. I wouldn't say everyone, but we've answered a large majority. Oh, here is one I missed earlier. Thank you, Mark, for saying it again.
Wanted to know how/when you found out the HDO makes good beekeeping equipment. Has to be a story there.
I'm sure there is. I never used it in Oregon. It was a Georgia thing. I bought some used lids once, and they were HDO, and that's how I figured out that the stuff was really good.
Yeah, I mean, the pallets that I got from you are just really good, strong, and I haven't speared one with a Hummerbee yet, Bob.
Oh, you will. Don't worry. You'll get that.
Thanks for jinxing me. I'm actually, since some of my bees have moved around, I'm fixing to move about 80 colonies into some other locations because we're going to be doing some gardening in that area, and I'd like to move them out of the way. And also a lot of them are singles, and right now they're fixing to turn over and will probably be a really powerful 10 frames within the next few days. And they're going to go into any holes, of course, and yards that maybe had a few dead outs, and so we can get all those honey production yards better. But I want to be moving those over, but most of the honey production yards are going to be stationary. And so I'm fixing to pick up all those pallets and put some 4x4s that I'm soaking in oil and diesel 50-50 ratio. And I learned that from watching your videos.
Yeah, they'll make your pallets last a lot longer.
Yeah. And maybe help me not spear them a little bit, get them off the ground a little bit so that grass doesn't cover it so much. Would there be any benefit to using a 3/8 inch shim on your bottom boards than the 3/4 inch shim for the entrances?
Sure is.
So explain that.
That's all I ever do. When I lived in Oregon, I never saw a 3/4 inch entrance. All the commercial beekeepers I knew use 3/8. And when I moved to Georgia, it was like, here's all these 3/4 inch entrances. Of course, people would say they needed the extra ventilation and all that stuff. So for right off the bat, a mouse can't get through 3/8 of an inch normally. 7/16, just one more 16th of an inch? The answer is yeah, the mouse can get through. So you'll very rarely see entrance reducers on my normal colonies in the winter because I'm not worried about mice getting out or going through. Also, you don't get, I call it ladder comb, I don't know, burr comb. When you have a 3/4 inch entrance, you have chunks of comb on the bottom bars of the lower box and also on your bottom board. When you have a 3/8 entrance, don't get nearly the amount of that ladder comb that the bees build to bridge from the bottom board up to the bottom bars. And of course, the real argument for having a big wide entrance is ventilation. And that's really easy to overcome. If you need extra ventilation, just crack a box or crack the lid and you've just made up the difference. I think the pros to 3/8 outweigh the cons to 3/8, but that's my personal opinion, and I am in the minority, so keep that in mind.
Well, I used them, and this was my first year using them. I had some bees that went up to Wisconsin, about 120 hives up there, and then the rest of them stayed in Tennessee. And we had a really hot summer, and they did fine. They did beard up a bit. We did end up cracking some of the lids on some of the most powerful colonies, and some people are like, well, isn't that going to start robbing? Well, the ones that needed the help the most were the ones that were so strong, nothing was fixing to mess with them anyways. And there's a couple solutions, especially if you're a hobby beekeeper and you can afford to be a little more creative and take a little bit more time. There are some people that are creating a shim that is screened with a little bit of feed on it, so the lid sits on top of it, and you have a screen up there and it lets all that heat out, but no bees can get up in there and get through. And because your heat rises and the bees are wanting to force that out anyways. So I've seen all kinds of different methods. Having an extra lid on top, honestly, in really hot weather, just a simple another lid really helps.
I guess the very short answer to this is I really don't like that extra burr comb on the bottom bars of the bottom box with the 3/4 inch entrance. That's my main reason.
And I hate mice getting in there. I mean, I hate mice getting in there and eating all the stuff. There's a question from Luke a little while back, Chris. I'm going to go ahead and get to it real quick. And he was asking about condensing hives in summer. And I don't know where you're at, Luke. If you had, I just don't ever see that being needed to condense a hive in summer here. And I was having to put a third deep box on some of my colonies in August because they were so strong. I'd been feeding them. I drew out a box of foundations on several colonies in August, and we had a good fall flow this year where I was at. And so condensing a hive down in summer just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I don't live in a cooler region. Bob, do you know any reason why you would condense a hive down to a single or a smaller cavity in summer unless they were really weak?
No, I don't. Now, if he's referring to the condensing hive equipment, like an insulated top board, I could see benefit to that in the summer, keeping the top from getting so hot in the sun. I could see using those insulation boards in the summer too. I don't know why that wouldn't be a good thing.
So,
except for the bees might tear them up.
Yeah, you gotta really paint those polystyrene boards so they will chew through all of it.
Sir, yeah.
Bob, of all the bees you've ever used, and I realize several have done well for you, what is your favorite for production, varroa, hygiene, and temperament?
Well, I'm really just kind of getting involved in the varroa hygiene stuff over the last couple of years. I do see promise in the Golden West bees for that. Let's see. I'm going to know, I'll have a lot more information on that by the end of this season because we're trying so many variations. In our testing last year, the Caucasians weren't that superior. They weren't superior at all for varroa resistance, but we came up with several breeder queens out of our Caucasians that are showing zeros after a year and a half of no treatment. So I don't know what that means. Temperament, absolutely the Caucasians. That's why I have them. We like gentle bees. I'm spoiled. I don't want mean bees anymore. And the Golden West are fairly gentle bees. They're number 2 behind the Caucasians. Last year in all of our mite washes, the Golden West were showing really good varroa resistance. And oddly enough, some of our combinations of Caucasian, and other mite-resistant lines showed very good promise. I've mentioned several times in my videos that one of the favorite bees I've ever had, of course, this was before varroa mites, was Caucasian queens open mated with golden Italians. I loved those bees. I used to buy them out of North Carolina or Northern California when I lived in Oregon. And we're kind of sort of heading in that direction again, I think. We're going to be crossing Caucasians with Italians and Italians with Caucasians. We're going to play around a lot this coming summer. But I think it's going to end up being a mixture of Caucasian and Italian type of bees in the long run.
That sounds like fun. Looking forward to those videos. We're just going to do a few more questions. We got about 5 minutes, but we've got some right here, some great questions. Here's one from Edward. Is it better to overwinter or use a 5/5, which would be a nucleus colony, 5-frame nuke over a 5-frame nuke, or just put the bees in a 10-frame box for the building up of nukes? Okay, for the building up of nukes.
I've never overwintered with a 5/5. Just looking at it, it seems like it would be very good. I know I have a few friends that do that, and they report really good results. So I can only go by what others say. They say it works well.
What do you think about during the season, for a 5/5 versus a 10-frame box?
Yeah, I went over to visit Jennifer Berry one day over at her house, and she had these 5/5/5/5/5/5s, and she was using 10-foot 2x4s to keep them from falling over. So that can be problematic unless you're trying to keep them small. So that's definitely not recommended if you're letting them grow up real strong. So,
but yeah, Edwards, I know he's over a little bit south west of me, a little more towards the Delta area, Mississippi River, and those areas over in there. And I think he's wanting to make summer splits and build those up to overwinter.
Yeah, I'm looking at the question closer now. If you're just trying to make nukes, just split over and over and over and over, I would say the 5/5 probably would be a better bet. And I'm just guessing. I've never done it.
We have done it, and people are like, well, you can overwinter a 5-frame nuke in Tennessee, and you can, but it can't be 5 frames of bees in September, where half of those bees are forager bees. It really needs to be, in my opinion, a 5/5 situation where you have a good 8 to 10 frames of bees, and then when they die back, you end up with a good 4-frame to 5-frame cluster. And then you condense. I found really good success with that. Whenever I've tried to overwinter something that was a 5-frame nuke and try to overwinter it, I'll end up losing between 35 and 50% of them, because a lot of them end up reducing down to about 2.5 frames of a cluster, sometimes a little smaller. And in a really gentle winter, I'll end up having a pretty good overwintering. But in a really rougher winter, I end up losing more of them. And I found just making sure I have a bigger cluster is really helpful.
Yeah. I've noticed, there's a lot of debate about what's better, overwintering in a single or a double deep. If they're both come out of summer and you run them into winter, you'll usually have more bees in a double deep than you will in a single, for whatever reason. More room to brood in the fall. Not sure.
I think that's it. I made a mistake one year of getting the colonies really fed up well, and I had a good fall flow, and I didn't add any additional space. Most of them didn't swarm or anything, but they plugged that top box up so much the queen ran out of room to lay, and I ended up with colonies that did overwinter, but they ended up being smaller than what I would have liked. And so I'm really making a point during that late August and early few weeks in September during the fall flow for us, that I'm ensuring those powerful colonies have plenty of room to lay for that queen, so I can get the biggest clusters possible and wait a little bit later to pack them. And also ensure maybe, just throw an extra box up there just to, if there is a good flow, that it can go somewhere. So it's getting there on time. So this is another question from our member. Ripple effect. What's the best way to draw out the most combs and for splits in the spring, singles, or double deeps? Thoughts on walkaway splits from a good hive?
Well, the best way, if you're really trying to get combs drawn out and you don't have a good nectar flow on, is to feed very thin syrup. It's interesting. Research is showing that thinner than 1-to-1 will do a better job of drawing comb out than 1-to-1, oddly enough. So if there's not a nectar flow, consider feeding very thin syrup. And walkaway splits, I've done a ton of them, as I said earlier, with mixed results. You need to pull off those few tricks I mentioned about going back and picking out the best cells and feed thin syrup while they're building their cells. Make sure they've got fresh pollen in the comb. Make sure that when you walk away with that split that they have all the nutrition they could possibly need already, because they may be losing their field force. Yeah, there's things you can do to a walkaway split to make it better. But in general, if you don't do anything special, I think you end up with a higher percentage of inferior queens.
That has totally been our experience when we've done it. If we have done a couple interesting trials, and you need to start off with a good population of bees, like Bob said. But I think what you do is you get a frame of eggs and you mark that on top with a red marker or something. And then you come back after a handful of days, and then anything that's not from that egg section, you just cut it down.
I like that idea. That's a good idea.
Well, it really wasn't my idea. We tried it after someone who was trying it up in New York said, "Hey, I think this is a good way of doing it." And I thought about it. I'm like, that makes sense, because they only could do it from the proper age at that point. And I think that works pretty good. But to me, I still feel like it's worth it. If once you learn how to graft your own queens, it's such a amazing ability to really boost your colonies a lot quicker. And you also can make a couple of other small mating nukes. So if you're making 10 splits and you make a few extra small mating nukes for these extra queens, because you'll never get 100% takes on any method that you use, or very, very rarely. You always have a backup plan to make sure you hit your numbers. You just combine back whatever you need to. And queen rearing is a lot of fun. I love queen rearing. So, and a lot of it's timing too, especially the further north you go, you have a shorter season. And so you need these colonies big enough so they can go into winter with a strong cluster, so they have more time to draw combs out. So your season is only so long. So maybe this isn't as important to some people. And of course, we all have different desires on what we're trying to get out of our bees, but it's something to think about, that we have a finite amount of time, and the quicker that queen gets to work, the more combs and honey and stuff like that.
For sure. Yeah.
King Bob and Kamon grew out a beard. What a day. This is not a beard. This is a couple days without Laurel taking the straight razor to me. When you take pre-orders for nukes, I don't know what that OW is, nukes or nukes in general, how much of a buffer do you plan for? So Bob, if you're wanting to sell 500 nukes, how much of a buffer are you going to give yourself?
I might make 700 to sell 500. And then I always end up with extra, but I always like to err on the side of caution. My worst nightmare would be to call somebody that gave me a deposit 4 months ago for a nuke and call them 2 weeks ahead of time when they can't buy a nuke anywhere else and say, "I'm so sorry, but I won't have your nuke for you this year." So I always err on the side of caution. And if what's interesting is you can always sell the extras. It's not a problem. And then if you can't sell them, you can just grow them out and make them a single and sell them later if you really need to get rid of them. So just my recommendation in a nutshell is to err on the side of caution and make like 25 or 30% extra.
Yeah, I can't agree with that enough. That the stress of cutting it close or not having enough, especially if you're a person that cares about what you do, that's tough to live with. So always give yourself some forgiveness, because Mother Nature always has her say. And in most years, she's pretty decent, but all it takes is 1 year.
One bad year.
Get you.
I have a friend who gave me this advice a long time ago, and he said,
Bob?
Yeah.
Oh.
Did I lose you?
My sound just kicked off.
Are we still?
Hey, Laurel, technical issue. Bob, answer this question real quick for me, please. This is one of our friends, Matt Clark, the Major's Bees. When is the latest in the year that you would graft queens?
Well, you can graft as late as you still have drones to mate with. We stopped grafting in midsummer. We don't like to go too late into the season. I used to make so many nukes in the latter part of the season, always to struggle to try to get them ready and get them through winter. So we quit pretty early. Midsummer, we're usually done grafting. Midsummer in our area. I guess if you're looking for a date, I'd say sometime in mid to late July, we're done grafting usually. And that suits us. Somebody else would have a different experience. Kamon, you look like you can't hear a thing. I wonder if anybody can even hear me. I might be talking to myself.
I can hear you, Bob. I just lost a power for whatever reason out of my speaker, but
Okay.
it's currently working. But I've got to we need to wind this up anyways. It's 10 o'clock your time. I want to say a big thank you to Paul Martin for supporting us again, not only here, being one of our members, and also coming to our expo for I don't know how many times you and your wife have been there, Paul, but we do appreciate you being there. We've got a lot of plans to make it better. Bob has promised even greater things with his booth this year, haven't you, Bob?
I have, yeah. I'm asking for another 10 feet if you'll allow me to have it.
It's more than 10 feet. You want 10 feet the whole length, right?
Well, we'll talk.
All right.
We'll talk.
Yes. Well,
Right.
Is it Friday the 13th? Oh, I guess it is.
What is Friday the 13th? It's my lucky day, and I didn't even know it.
That's right. Well, Bob, I always appreciate having a
Yes, sir.
conversation with you, and of
Yeah.
course, it's more fun when we get to share some of the conversation with other beekeepers. I know all these people appreciate the time that you take to make the videos. You're a busy guy, and it's a service that you're doing for everybody because you got other things you could do to probably make you a lot more money. But you care about bees and beekeepers, and we understand that that's what you're all about. So we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Kamon. I appreciate you. And
Yeah.
we'll see you in the future.
All right, everybody. See you in the next video. Thanks, Bob.